Welcome back to OnOne Photo Raw 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the edit module inside of the program. Now I have these images selected here and I've picked this image of the horse. I have changed the render preview to accurate. There is definitely a noticeable difference when you have photographs like this that are shot at a really shallow depth of field. They're a little hard to tell under the fast render if they're in focus and totally sharp. Accurate, you can tell one way or the other. Now, this isn't a bad thing or a good thing. Remember, you're trying to, one method, get through something quickly. But you're going to need to remember, if you shoot at a shallow depth of field, it might be a little difficult to tell if you shot something in focus or not. In this case, the image was totally in focus. I switched to accurate. It only takes a second to accurately render the image, and you should be good to go. To develop a photo, what you're going to do is scroll on up here to the top and click on Edit. And then it's going to go ahead and change that view. Now, if you have a window that's open and looks like this, these are the presets or effects inside of Photo Raw. They are far superior to anything in Lightroom that I've ever seen. This is definitely one of the good points within the program. Their effects and different little modules and things that you can add in here are definitely worth the money. But what we're going to do, we're going to close that. We'll work and do the effects in a completely different video. So just so we can see this image a little bit better and it's a little cleaner, we're going to go ahead and close that window. First thing we're going to do is just kind of go through and see what's on this page. So we're going to come up here and take a look at the different options. We have a crop tool, a transform tool, the text tool, the local tool, which is for doing selective adjustments, meaning where you want to apply a adjustment selectively on a specific spot. A faces tool that we can retouch with. We have a mask tool. We have a refine tool, a retouching tool, and just our regular view tool here. Now we've already gone over these options here. Down here, we have different ways to look at this. We have this so that we have just the window with a picture and the thumbnails below it, or what I'm going to use is actually the single window because we don't really need to have the thumbnails at this point. Over here, we have this little slider that we can magnify that image with. This is a preview where we can compare before and after what we've done, and I will show you that towards the end. We can hide and show our mask in the image. We can enable or disable soft proofing. Soft proofing is a way to see what your image is going to look like when it's printed. A lot of times what people don't realize is a lot of monitors nowadays are very high resolution, and there's no way a printer can actually print the quality that you see on your computer. This is going to give you a more realistic view of what your final image should look like in print. And then we just have a simple hide and show the preview. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and we're going to scroll on back over here. We can use our navigation window, meaning that we can click anywhere in here and it's going to zoom to that location. I can show the levels. I can show my info and history. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and leave levels up for right now. This is called a histogram. So if nobody's ever seen that, this is your histogram. And this is just showing you where the data is in your image. A lot of people think, well, you don't want all your information to the right or to the left. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you have a lot of black, it's always going to be to one side. If you have a lot of white, like in this image, you're going to have a high concentration of levels over here on the right. Down here, we have the ability to work in layers. Now, this program is very similar to Lightroom, and this is one aspect that Lightroom does not have. It does not have the ability to work in layers. You need to send your photo over to Photoshop to work in layers. It's not like Adobe does not have the ability to do it. It's just different. So we can control the opacity of the layers, which is great. Right here, we can add a layer, we can duplicate a layer, and over here are our blending modes. And we will get into blending modes at another time, but your blending modes are here, and they are exactly the same as they are inside of Photoshop. We have a few different options to configure this panel. So this is the develop module. We can see the develops are here. We have the effects, which we saw over here at that one time. These are your effects. We have the portrait mode, in which you're going to be able to do some retouching, and then local, in which you're going to be able to make a selective adjustment instead of a global. A global adjustment is when you make an adjustment, it affects everything in the image. A selective adjustment is only applied to the area that you apply it to. We're going to scroll back up, and we're going to go back to the develop module. Usually start out doing global adjustments and then move into selective after that. Next thing that we have here is you are able to pick your camera profile. Now, OnOne has some OnOne profiles. As we hover over these, you're seeing how the different profiles affect the image. There's no right or wrong camera profile. It just kind of depends on the user and what you like. So those are the OnOne ones. And then we have some that are trying to replicate what would be inside of a camera. We have landscape, neutral, camera portrait, standard. And if you don't like any of the profiles above, you can always import your own profiles. In my case, I could import the Canon camera profiles, put them in here and use those. That was something that I wanted. So what we'll do is we'll just leave it at standard OnOne profile for right now. The next thing that we have is tone, and that is a combination of exposure, contrast, highlights, midtones, shadows, whites, blacks. We have three different modes. We have a manual mode. We have an artificial intelligence match mode, which it seems to be running through the process right now. And then we have an AI auto mode, which we have over here, which is just going to vary the image a little bit. And what those are doing are just kind of analyzing your image and automatically adjusting the sliders for you. This does not mean that you can't go in and change the sliders after the fact. I can click on manual, start over, and I can manually adjust these as I wish. Now, I tend to not to prefer to use the AI and AI auto modes when I'm toning. I'm just not a fan of it. I've been toning long enough that I can do this quickly. It is also beneficial to learn yourself in a manual mode before you start using auto modes, because what happens is a lot of times when you start using effects and other things inside of programs, you need to adjust them for each photo. If you don't know how to use the different elements inside of the program, you're not going to know what to adjust to affect the image to make it look how you want. We will slide on down here. The next thing that we have here is a color mode. So we are adjusting the color mode. Usually the color mode's up here next to the camera profile, but in this case, it's not. It's down here a little bit. We have an auto mode where we can click and it will automatically do it. We also can come down here. You're going to notice that these are very similar to what is on your camera as far as white balance. So you can set these according to how your image was shot. In this case, we can leave it as shot, or I could try auto to see if auto looks good. In this case, it looks a little bit warm, and I think as shot is a better selection or choice in this case. Now, after you've chosen one of these, whether it's as shot or whatever you have, right here you have the ability to manually slide your temperature adjustment. Notice that this is in Kelvin down here. And if you go this way, it's going to warm up your photo. And if you go this way, it's going to cool down your photo. This slider is your tint. Going this way is going to make it more magenta, and this way is going to make it more green. We have a saturation slider and a vibrance slider. And down here, we have a great little addition. This is called Reduce Vibrance on Skin. A lot of times you might want to increase the vibrance in your image, but you definitely don't want to do that on skin. Skin with like too much color looks really odd. So we have the availability to come in here and kind of control the purity of the color, either on your highlights or your shadows as well. So that's a cool little aspect that I haven't seen a lot on programs. The next thing that we have down here is called detail. Now, detail is basically sharpening and noise reduction. So we have some sharpening and some noise reduction. Sharpening is just going to increase the sharpening on your image. Now, most images need to be sharpened because they use an anti-aliasing filter in the camera. That helps reduce noise, but in turn, it makes your image a little bit soft, especially if you're shooting Canon. Down here, we have lens corrections. Lens correction will identify the camera that this image was shot with if you turn it on. So we'll come over here, turn it on. Notice it's recognizing my camera model and the lens that this was shot with. And this can correct for vignetting and distortion. You're not going to really see a lot of adjustments in a longer focal length like this, but if you have a wider focal length lens where you're getting some arc because of the wide angle lens, it will straighten that stuff out. And you can always come in here and do some manual distortion control as well. So we have the ability to adjust fringing and image fall off. And the last thing that we have down here is called transform. So we are able to transform our image, and this can help you fix keystoning and some other things. It will allow us to level out our image. And we'll go into some of these specifically later. Right now, we're just going to go ahead and hide those effects. The next thing that we have are effects. Now, OnOne has amazing effects and a lot of amazing control over those effects, how they're applied and where they're applied. So we're going to do a separate video just on effects. We have retouching and then our local adjustments. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come in here and just do some basic adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead here and slide over, and we're going to do some basic adjustments. Now, the first thing that you want to do when you're adjusting your image, you don't want to, like in this case, this horse is a little bit dark, but I don't want to make this bright because then it's blowing out this part of the image. If you make an adjustment and it ruins another area, that means you need to do a selective adjustment to bring that area out. And in this case, that's definitely the case. Now, notice I've made this adjustment. To reset it, you probably just go ahead and click exposure. If anybody has any tips or tricks when using OnOne that I have not gone over, hey, please let me know in the comments below. So we can take a look at the contrast. I'm actually going to lower the contrast a little bit in this image. I can always bring this back in the end. Cool thing about raw photos is you never actually adjust or change anything in a raw photo. This is just information or data that's written in a separate XMP file that applies to a preview. And what you see is a preview of how your image is going to look, but you never actually overwrite your original image. This is just a preview of what the adjustment is going to look like on that image. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my shadows just a bit because I know I need to open up that area. And that's about all I'm going to do for this image. I could come in here and change some stuff. It looks like it's getting a little bit yellow, but we can fix that later. What we're going to do is slide back up here and go to local. Local is going to let us apply an image, and you're going to hear me use the word paint. Basically, we're going to make an adjustment and then we're going to brush on that adjustment. That's how it's going to be applied. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll try to darken the background. I will take my highlights and move those down a bit and move my exposure. Notice when I did that, you did not see any adjustment. But once I take my brush, and I need to make my brush a lot bigger, I can come in and apply that. And now you can see it's going into that specific location. So when you initially make this adjustment, you're not actually going to see anything change on the image. What's going to happen is you're going to paint this in and then you're going to be like, oh, this is too dark in this area. Well, that's okay because this is non-destructive editing and you can come in here and refine that and get that exactly where you want it to be. In your brush, there's two rings. So right over my blue cursor is a ring. From that ring to the inside, it's 100% of the effect. From the inside ring to the outside ring is what's called the feather. It is kind of slowly feathering that adjustment out. So you can see up here that we have paint in mode, meaning I'm painting in. This is the size of my brush, and this is the feather, and this is the opacity. I can control those up here. Now I'm going to use what's called the scrub brush. So you'll notice normally when I have my screen up here, if I go over the input, it's giving me the ability to manually input. So I can select that and put 77 and change that feather. But if I go over feather, I get this little left and right arrow. This is like a scrubber brush. So if I hold down with my mouse or my finger on my trackpad and I scroll to the left, it lowers that. And if I go to the right, it increases that. So in this case, I actually want to lower that. And if I want to lower my brush size, I can go there. And if I want to go a bigger brush size, I can go to the right. And it's instantly showing you what size your brush is. And then you can come in here and apply this to the areas that you want. Now, I'm not going to go in this video because this is kind of a complicated mask that I want to put in here, and it will take me a while. But you basically would go in and apply that to the area that you want to adjust. And then at any time, even if you save or close this program, you can always come back in here and adjust the amounts of either lightening or darkening or any adjustment that you make inside of the program. Right here, there's something that says paint color. So I'm going to go ahead and click that paint with color. This is what's called a quick mask. This is showing you where you have applied that adjustment. However, it is not showing you the adjustment anymore. It's just showing you where the adjustment is at. This can help sometimes if you're not sure, especially if you do a small adjustment, to make sure that you got an area. So in this case, I can be like, oh, I missed this little area. Now you need to constantly resize brushes for whatever you're doing in an image. So in this case, I might need to resize my brush and come in here and finish applying that to a specific area. I can turn that off and then that will disappear or hide. So I'm going to hit reset to undo that adjustment. I'm going to click back on add adjustment. In this case, I'm going to open up and add a little contrast to the horse. So we're going to go ahead and just add a little black or contrast in this image. So black is just making your blacks a little bit blacker. Contrast is making your whites whiter or your blacks darker, both at the same time. So I just want to add a little black to this image to make it a little stronger. Right there, I didn't go up into the brush. I actually used the bracket keys next to the letter P to control my brush size. So if you want to just manually control your brush size, you can use the brackets next to it. You can see in this case, I have changed my blacks by adjusting this little area right here. And if I want to change that, I can simply come in here and either add more, less to a specific area. In this case, it looks like we've got a little exposure adjustment as well that I didn't want. So we'll come in here, and add that black. And then I could just simply come in here and apply this to the rest of the area. Now right here, obviously the leg is smaller, so I need to make a smaller brush to come in here and apply this specifically to a smaller area. Now, if you're doing this and you mess up, it's no big deal. Notice right here, it says paint in mode. We can switch over to paint out mode and we can just go over that and that will paint that area out. Same thing, if you paint an area out and mess up, you can switch this over to paint in mode. Now I can come in here and paint this in, and then I'm going to mess up again. Now there's a quicker way to do this. Now I have my right hand on my mouse or my Wacom tablet or my trackpad. My left hand usually lives on the left hand side of my keyboard because there's a lot of keys within photography that you hit a lot. And in this case, it's my Alt Option key. And you'll notice right in the center, there's a plus, meaning that I'm adding to the selection. If I hold that Alt Option, it turns to a minus and it automatically lets me paint out of that area. So you can see up here, it's changed it to paint out. If I let go of that key, it's paint in. Hold it, it's paint out. Let go, it's paint in. A really cool little adjustment that you have here. So I'm going to hit reset. We're going to hit add adjustment. And then we're going to go up here and we're going to try to do a gradient. So I'm going to click on the gradient. I'm going to come in here and we're just going to drag this around. And you can see it is adding a gradient as per this adjustment. Now, right now, it's kind of flipped this. So it's the opposite of what I want. So we have linear top and I want linear bottom. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do these different gradients. So basically, I want this to darken and this to not be affected. And then if I want to adjust this, these little dotted lines are saying, hey, this is where it starts to fade out. And by here, it's completely faded out. So this is a good way to get kind of a seamless gradient or effect applying to your image, especially when you have a horizontal horizon line. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply that so it slowly fades out of that area. Now we can make this adjustment, do whatever we want. We're just going to go ahead, we'll just leave it so it's just a little bit dark like that. Now the problem with this is, just like before, it's in the horse and we don't want it in the horse. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click on that brush, and remember, we want paint out mode, and I will make my brush a little bit bigger, and I can now actually apply it out of the horse. So we made the gradient and we're applying this not on the horse, but everywhere, but in the sky above the horse. Now, if you remember before, I was trying to paint all that in and it was really difficult and going to take a long time. This is a case where making that gradient and just simply painting it out of the horse is a whole lot faster. Learning programs and learning these little tricks is very helpful when you're trying to learn to quickly tone images inside of any program. So now we've made this adjustment and we've applied that out. Now what happens if I want to make a new adjustment? No big deal. You can easily scroll up here, hit add adjustment, and now we've got a whole new adjustment. I can come in here and I can change the contrast. So what we'll do is we'll make this back to 0. So I'll double click exposure. I'll add a little contrast and I'll add just a little bit of black. And then we'll come in here and we will go back to paint in mode. And we will apply that to the horse. And so we're making a small tonal adjustment to the horse to help him pop out and look a whole lot better in this image. And you would basically go through your whole photo making these selective adjustments. A lot of your global adjustments that you do in the beginning are just trying to get it in the kind of basic vicinity of where you need to go. But a lot of your main adjustments are most likely going to be selective. So that's the basics of doing just simple adjustments inside of OnOne Photo. Next time we're going to come in here, I'm going to show you some of the crop tools and some of these other little tools that we have available to further adjust our image. If this video has been helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And as always, if you have any comments, you can leave those below, and don't forget to subscribe.